The blood on Natasha Harvey's white nurse's uniform wasn't from a patient this time. It was her own, dripping from her split lip as she crouched in the back seat of a stranger's Mercedes, her hands trembling so violently she could barely silence her phone as Brian's 47th call of the day lit up the screen. Through the tinted window of the underground parking garage, she could see his shadow moving between the concrete pillars, hunting her like prey. "Natasha," his voice echoed off the walls, that same voice that once whispered poetry to her now twisted into something monstrous. "You can't hide forever, baby. If I can't have you, no one will." She pressed herself lower, tasting copper and fear, and prayed to a God she wasn't sure was listening anymore that whoever owned this car wouldn't return until he was gone, or better yet, wouldn't return at all. But God, it seemed, had a cruel sense of timing. 18 months earlier, Natasha Harvey had believed in fairy tales. She believed in the kind of love that made your heart skip when his name appeared on your phone, the kind that made Sunday mornings feel like small eternities wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets and the smell of fresh coffee. Brian Scott had been everything she thought she wanted, devastatingly handsome with his sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes, brilliant in the courtroom, charming at dinner parties, and seemingly enchanted by everything about her. He'd pursued her with the intensity of a man who knew what he wanted, sending flowers to the hospital where she worked, learning the names of all her friends, remembering that she took her tea with honey and lemon, no sugar. Their first date had been at an upscale Italian restaurant where he'd impressed her with his knowledge of wine and made her laugh with stories about his most eccentric clients. He'd asked about her work with genuine interest, his eyes lighting up when she described the intricacies of cardiac care and the small victories that made 12-hour shifts worthwhile. He'd walked her to her car, kissed her hand like something out of an old movie, and asked if he could see her again. She'd said yes before he'd even finished the question. The early months had been intoxicating. Brian had integrated himself into her life with the precision of a master strategist, though she hadn't seen it that way then. He'd charmed her mother with his manners, impressed her father with his knowledge of local politics, and won over her younger sister Maya with his willingness to help her with college application essays. He'd attended her nursing school graduation ceremony, cheering louder than anyone when she received her master's degree, standing for a photo with her and her 3 research partners as they celebrated the completion of their thesis on innovative cardiac care protocols in underserved communities. That photo had made the local news. Their research had garnered attention from the medical community, and suddenly Natasha found herself being interviewed for nursing journals, invited to speak at conferences. She'd been proud, excited, humbled by the recognition. Brian had smiled for the cameras, congratulated her publicly, but something had shifted in his eyes that she'd been too intoxicated with success to notice. The compliments became backhanded. "It's great that you're getting attention, but don't let it go to your head." The support became conditional. "Another interview? Don't you think you're oversaturating your image?" Her friends had noticed. Maya had noticed. "There's something about the way he looks at you when you're talking to other people," her best friend Keisha had said over drinks one evening. "Like he's calculating something." "You don't know him like I do," Natasha had replied, defensive. "He's just protective. He loves me." How many women had said those exact words, she would later wonder, as they stood at the edge of their own destruction. The proposal had come on a perfect autumn evening, at the botanical gardens where they'd had their 3rd date. He'd gotten down on one knee beside the fountain, the sunset painting everything gold, and presented her with a ring that must have cost 3 months of his salary. She'd said yes through happy tears, and he'd kissed her deeply, possessively, his hands tight on her waist. That night, in his penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, he'd made love to her with an intensity that felt different somehow, more claiming than cherishing. The change hadn't been overnight. It never is. It started with small questions. Who was she texting? Why was Dr. Martinez always stopping by her station? Why did she need to go to happy hour with her colleagues? She'd answered patiently at first, thinking his jealousy was a sign of how much he cared. Then came the day he'd grabbed her phone during dinner, scrolling through her messages while refusing to let her see his. When she protested, he'd looked at her with those ice blue eyes gone cold and said, "What are you hiding?" "Nothing. But you're hiding yours." "I'm a lawyer, Natasha. I have confidential client communications." "You're a nurse. Who are you texting that's so secret?" The logic was twisted, but she'd let it slide. Then let it slide again. And again. Each concession making the next one easier, each boundary crossed making the next violation feel inevitable. The gym incident had been a turning point, though she hadn't recognized it then. A man she'd never met had asked if she was using a piece of equipment. Just a polite question from a stranger. Brian had materialized beside her like a storm front, getting in the man's face, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper he usually reserved for hostile witnesses. "You talking to my fiancé?" Security had to intervene. In the car afterward, Brian had gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. "You were encouraging him. It's called being polite." "Well, maybe you should be less polite. You're engaged now. You represent me." The financial control had crept in next. He'd suggested they merge their accounts for wedding planning. It would be easier, he'd said. She'd hesitated and he'd looked wounded. "Don't you trust me? I'm going to be your husband." So she'd agreed, and suddenly he was questioning every transaction. Why did she need that dress? That coffee was overpriced. Did she really need to contribute so much to her parents' mortgage? They're adults, Natasha. They should be able to handle their own finances. I've been helping them since I started working. It's important to me. More important than our future? We need to save for the wedding, for a house, for our life together. Her mother had taken her aside at Sunday dinner, concern etched in every line of her face. "Baby, Maya told me about some things she's noticed. The way Brian watches you, the way he steers you away from conversations with other people. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mama." "Everyone's overreacting. Baby, I've lived a lot longer than you. I've seen this before. It starts small. Brian loves me. He's just adjusting to being engaged. It's a lot of pressure with his career, and love doesn't isolate, baby. It doesn't control." But Natasha had pulled away, defensive, sure that everyone else was wrong and she was right. Isn't that what he'd been telling her? That everyone was jealous, that they didn't understand their love, that it was them against the world? The first time he'd pushed her, she'd convinced herself it was an accident. They'd been arguing about her schedule. She'd picked up an extra shift to help with a staffing shortage, and he'd wanted her at a political dinner with his father, who was mounting a campaign for state senator. "You're making me look bad," he'd said, backing her against the kitchen counter. "I told my father you'd be there. I didn't know about it until today, Brian. People's lives depend on." He'd shoved her aside hard enough that she'd stumbled into the door frame. Always the martyr. Always putting everyone else first. Then he'd left, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. He'd come back hours later with flowers and apologies, saying he'd been stressed, that he'd never do it again, that he loved her so much it scared him sometimes. She'd accepted the apology, the flowers, the desperate lovemaking that followed. She'd wanted to believe him. But it happened again. And again. Always careful, always in places that wouldn't show. A push here, a grab there, his fingers leaving brief red marks on her arms that faded quickly. "You're making me crazy," he'd say. "If you'd just listen, I wouldn't get so frustrated." The day she discovered he was having an affair with his secretary Rebecca, the world had tilted on its axis. She'd stopped by his office to surprise him with lunch and had seen them through the glass wall of the conference room. Too close, his hand on her face, their foreheads touching. When she confronted him, he barely flinched. "She understands the pressures of my work in ways you never could. And unlike you, she doesn't embarrass me by constantly seeking attention for herself." "I'm not seeking attention." "That media circuit you did? Basking in the spotlight while I'm trying to build a serious career?" You made it look like I'm engaged to some glory-hungry nurse who cares more about magazine covers than supporting her husband's ambitions. You're not my husband, Brian. And after what I've seen, you never will be. That's when she saw it, the cold calculation in his eyes, the mask slipping completely. You think you can just leave me? Do you know who my father is? Do you know what I could do to you? She'd backed toward the door, and for the first time she'd felt genuine fear. We're done, Brian. We're done when I say we're done. She'd gone straight to the hospital administrator's office and requested time off. Then to a lawyer's office to file for a restraining order. Then home to pack her things from the apartment they'd been planning to share after the wedding. Brian had been waiting there, his face a mask of controlled rage. What happened next was a blur of shouting, of him grabbing her wrists, of her breaking free and running to her car with half her clothes still in the closet. She'd driven to her parents' house with shaking hands, checking the rearview mirror every 30 seconds. The restraining order had been granted, but paper meant nothing to a man with connections. Within days, things had started going wrong at work. Supplies she'd swear she'd stocked going missing, medication counts coming up short on her shifts, complaints filed against her for rudeness she'd never displayed. She'd seen Brian's hand in all of it but couldn't prove anything. Then came the car following her home from work, always staying just far enough back that she couldn't get a license plate. When she told people, they'd looked at her with concern. Was she sleeping enough? Was she under too much stress? Maybe she needed some time off? Brian had been careful, always careful. No texts, no calls, no proof. Just the constant feeling of being watched, of being hunted. Her therapist had suggested she was experiencing hypervigilance from the trauma of the relationship. Maybe. But that didn't explain the man in the coffee shop who looked too much like Brian's colleague. The car idling across from her gym at odd hours. The feeling of eyes on her back every time she left her apartment. The breaking point had come when her supervisor had called her in for a serious discussion about the complaints against her work. Natasha, I've known you for 3 years. This isn't like you. But I have to put you on administrative leave pending an investigation. She'd known then that Brian was systematically destroying her career, her credibility, her life. That night, she gathered her family and closest friends in her parents' living room and told them what she'd barely admitted to herself. I need to disappear. Brian is going to kill me if I stay here. I don't know when, I don't know how, but I can feel it. Every day he's tightening the noose. Her mother had cried. Maya had wanted to call the police, but Natasha had explained, Brian's father had the police commissioner in his pocket. His firm represented half the force in legal matters. Who would they believe? The established lawyer from a prominent family or the nurse who was already under investigation at work? Where will you go? Her father had asked, his voice breaking. I don't know. Somewhere far. I'll call when I can, but I need you to understand. If he asks, you don't know where I am. You can't know. It's safer for everyone. 3 days later, she boarded a bus to Seattle with 2 suitcases and a new phone. She'd chosen Seattle because she'd never been there, had no connections there, had never mentioned it in any conversation with Brian. She'd found a small apartment, gotten a job at Seattle Grace Hospital, and started rebuilding her life one terrifying day at a time. For 6 months, she'd breathed easier. The nightmares had started to fade. She'd made a few casual friends at work, nothing deep. She couldn't afford deep, couldn't afford to let anyone get close enough to find out about her past. She'd started seeing a therapist who specialized in domestic violence survivors. She'd learned to sleep through most nights without jerking awake at every sound. Then 2 weeks ago she'd seen him. Or thought she had. A man in a dark coat at the end of her street, standing under a streetlight. When she'd looked again, he was gone. 3 days later, another sighting. In the hospital cafeteria, a figure disappearing around a corner. She'd convinced herself she was being paranoid. That's what Brian wanted, to live in her head rent-free even when he wasn't there. But today she'd known for certain. She'd been leaving the hospital after her shift, heading toward the underground parking garage, when she'd seen him standing by the elevator, his back to her. That coat, that build, that way of standing with his weight slightly forward, predatory, coiled. He'd started to turn and she'd bolted, running deeper into the parking garage instead of toward her car. She'd heard his footsteps echoing behind her, heard his voice calling her name with mock sweetness. "Natasha, baby, is that you? I've missed you so much." She'd run blindly between cars, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest, and then she'd seen it, a black Mercedes with its rear door unlocked. Without thinking, driven by pure survival instinct, she'd yanked it open and thrown herself inside, pulling the door quietly closed and ducking below the window line. Now here she was, bleeding and terrified, listening to Brian's voice getting closer, her phone buzzing with his calls, wondering if this was how her story would end, hiding in a stranger's car in an underground parking garage, waiting for a man who'd once promised to love and cherish her to make good on his threats. Come out, wherever you are," Brian sang, his voice bouncing off concrete. "You think you're so smart running across the country. But I have friends everywhere, Natasha. Did you really think you could hide from me? I own people in Seattle too. It just took me a little time to find the right connections." Footsteps. Close now. Right outside the Mercedes. Natasha held her breath, her hand clamped over her mouth to muffle any sound. "I know you're here somewhere," he said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. "The security guard saw you run into the garage. He's an old friend of mine now. We've gotten very close over the past few weeks. You'd be amazed what people will do for the right price and the right connections." The shoes moved away and Natasha dared to breathe. But she knew she was trapped. He knew she was in the garage. It was only a matter of time before he systematically checked every vehicle before he found her. She looked at her phone, 7:47 p.m. How long would he search before giving up? Would he give up at all? She was composing a text to Maya, just in case, just so someone would know what happened if she didn't make it out, when she heard voices. New voices. "Mom, careful on this step." A man's voice, deep and calm, with the faint accent of someone who'd learned English as a second language. "I'm fine, Junho. Stop fussing." An older woman's voice, warm but tired. "You just had a cardiac episode. I'm allowed to fuss." Natasha's eyes widened. Oh no. The car's owner was returning. With his mother. Who just had a cardiac episode. Probably the patient she'd helped stabilize in the CCU this morning. Mrs. Lim, who'd been rushed in with arrhythmia and chest pain. Sweet woman, scared but trying to be brave. Natasha had held her hand during the worst of it, explaining each procedure in a soothing voice, making sure she understood she wasn't alone. Footsteps approached the car. Natasha pressed herself lower, knowing it was futile but unable to stop herself. She heard the front door open, the man helping his mother into the passenger seat. "There, comfortable?" Yes. "You're too much worry, Junho. Can't help it. You're my only mother." The rear door opened. Natasha looked up into the most startled face she'd ever seen. A Korean man in an impeccably tailored suit, his hand frozen in mid-reach toward the back seat where he'd clearly intended to place the bag of his mother's medications and belongings. For a moment, they stared at each other in mutual shock. Junho Lim had seen many surprising things in his 34 years, particularly in his line of work, but finding a beautiful woman in a nurse's uniform hiding in his back seat with blood on her face was a first. His hand instinctively went to the weapon he kept concealed under his jacket, but something stopped him, the look in her eyes. Not criminal cunning, not drug-fueled desperation. Just pure animal terror. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please don't call the police. Please don't make me leave. There's a man, he's going to kill me, please." Junho's mind worked quickly. He looked at her face, really looked, split lip, bruising starting to show on her jaw, the way she was holding her ribs like they hurt. He looked at her uniform, recognized her face from this morning when his mother had been in crisis. This was the nurse who'd made the difference, who'd kept his mother calm, who'd noticed the subtle signs that something was escalating beyond the doctor's initial assessment and had called for the cardiologist immediately. His mother's doctor had told him that Nurse Harvey's quick thinking had likely saved his mother's life. "Is he in the garage?" Junho asked quietly. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. The white man in the expensive suit, walking between the cars like he's hunting something? Another nod. Junho's jaw tightened. He glanced at his mother in the front seat. She was settling in but equally shocked at the woman at the back, though at that time she didn't know it was the nurse that held her hand from earlier in the hospital. Junho made a decision. Stay down. Don't make a sound. He placed the bag on the seat, partially covering her, then closed the door quietly and walked around to the driver's side. As he did, a man approached, white, mid-30s, handsome in a cold way, with eyes that reminded Junho of certain men he'd had to deal with in his business. Men who saw people as objects to be owned or destroyed. "Excuse me," the man said, flashing a smile that didn't reach those eyes. "I'm looking for someone, a woman, African-American, nurse's uniform. Have you seen anyone like that?" Junho regarded him with the flat, neutral expression that had served him well in many negotiations. "No. Are you sure? She ran into this garage about 10 minutes ago. I've been in the hospital with my mother. Haven't seen anyone." The man's smile tightened. "You wouldn't mind if I looked in your car, would you?" "I would mind, actually. I'm a lawyer. I could make things difficult for you." Junho smiled then, and it was the smile his business rivals had learned to fear. "I'm Junho Lim. Do you know that name?" The man's face flickered with uncertainty. Even across the country, certain names carried weight. The Lim family had reach, connections, a reputation. "Didn't think so," Junho continued pleasantly. "But make some calls. Ask around. Then decide if making things difficult for me is really the path you want to take. Now, I'm going to drive my mother home. She's had a very difficult day." He got in the car without waiting for a response, started the engine and pulled smoothly out of the parking spot. In the rearview mirror, he saw the man standing there, phone already to his ear, face tight with frustration. Junho drove carefully up the ramps and out into the evening air, taking a deliberately winding route through the city, checking constantly to make sure they weren't being followed. After 20 minutes, when he was certain they were clear, he spoke without turning around. "You can sit up now. We're not being followed." Slowly, Natasha emerged from behind the seat, still shaking. Mrs. Lim turned around, gasping when she saw her. "The nurse? The nice nurse from this morning." "Hello, Mrs. Lim," Natasha managed, her voice unsteady. "What happened to your face?" Mrs. Lim reached back to touch Natasha's cheek with gentle, maternal concern. "Someone who wants to hurt me. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gotten into your car. I just didn't know where else to go and the door was not locked." Junho watched her in the mirror, saw the way she was holding herself together by threads. "The man in the garage, the lawyer. Is he the one who did this?" "In a way, yes. His name is Brian Scott. He was my fiancé. I ran from him, came here to start over, but he found me. I ran when I saw him, then I tripped and hit my lips. I had to get up and keep running." "And the restraining order?" Junho asked. "How did you?" "I know the look. You're not the first person I've seen running from someone who uses the law as a weapon." He turned onto a tree-lined street in one of Seattle's more exclusive neighborhoods. "My mother needs rest and frankly so do you. You'll come home with us. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." "I can't. I don't even know you." "You saved my mother's life today," Junho said firmly. "The doctor told me. You noticed something the others missed, pushed for the intervention that made the difference. In my family, deaths are not taken lightly. You need help. I can provide it." End of discussion. Natasha looked at Mrs. Lim, who was nodding emphatically. "He's right. You helped me. Now we help you. You'll stay with us. Junho will keep you safe." The older woman patted her son's shoulder proudly. "My son is very good at keeping people safe." There was something in the way she said it that made Natasha wonder exactly what Junho Lim did for a living, but she was too exhausted, too scared, too grateful to ask questions. When the car pulled into the circular driveway of a massive house, modern architecture with traditional Korean elements, beautiful and imposing, she simply let herself be guided inside by Mrs. Lim while Junho made several phone calls in Korean. The house was exquisite, clean lines, understated elegance, art that even Natasha's untrained eye could tell was expensive. Mrs. Lim led her upstairs to a guest room which was simply luxurious. You rest now. Junho will bring ice for your face. Mrs. Lim, I can't thank you enough. No thanks needed. You helped me when I was scared. Now we help you. She patted Natasha's hand and left, closing the door softly behind her. Natasha sat on the edge of the bed, her body finally acknowledging all the terror and adrenaline of the past hours. She started to shake uncontrollably, tears streaming down her face. She'd been so careful, so vigilant, and Brian had still found her. Oh, how had he tracked her down across an entire country? A soft knock interrupted her spiral and startled her. Come in, she called, quickly wiping her face. Junho entered carrying a first aid kit and a bag of ice wrapped in a clean towel. He hesitated in the doorway, clearly uncertain of the boundaries. May I? He gestured to the chair near the bed. She nodded, and he sat, maintaining a respectful distance. Up close, she could see him more clearly, younger than she'd initially thought, maybe mid-30s, with an aristocratic look, sharp features and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. He moved with the controlled grace of someone trained in something. Martial arts, probably. I need to understand what we're dealing with, he said gently. This Brian Scott, tell me about him. And so she did. Starting with the fairy tale beginning and ending with the nightmare of today, she told him everything. Junho listened without interrupting, his expression growing progressively darker as the story unfolded. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. His father is Edward Scott? The state senator? You know him? I know of him. Ambitious, connected, not particularly ethical. Junho's mouth tightened. The son sounds worse. Natasha, may I call you Natasha? Yes. Natasha, I'm going to be honest with you. The man you described, with those resources and that pathology, isn't going to stop. Restraining orders are paper. Even if he's arrested, his father will have him out in hours. I know, she whispered. That's why I ran. But he found me anyway. He found you because he has money and connections. But so do I. Junho leaned forward, his eyes intense. I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. My family's business is complicated. We have interests that aren't always strictly legal. I won't lie to you about that. But we have rules. We don't hurt innocents. We don't prey on the weak. And we pay our debts. You saved my mother. That means something in my world. What are you saying? I'm saying you're under my protection now. Brian Scott can have all the connections he wants. None of them will matter against mine. You'll stay here where I can ensure your safety. I'll have my people look into how he tracked you here and close those holes. And if he comes near you again, he'll learn that there are consequences even his father's money can't erase. Natasha should have been afraid. This man was admitting to criminal connections, to being part of something she'd only seen in movies. But all she felt was an overwhelming relief. Why would you do this for me? I told you. You saved my mother. That's my job. I'm a nurse. You did more than your job. You held her hand. You talked to her like she was a person, not just a patient. You made her feel safe when she was terrified. His voice softened. My mother is everything to me. I lost my father 5 years ago. She's all I have left of that life. So yes, I take this debt seriously. Natasha looked at this stranger who'd already shown her more genuine protection than Brian had in 2 years. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay. At least until we can figure out a permanent solution. He stood, moving toward the door. There's a bathroom through that door. Take a shower, rest. I'll have some clothes brought up for you. I think you're about my cousin's size. Tomorrow we'll talk more. Tonight just know that you're safe. I have security throughout the house and grounds. No one gets in without my knowledge. Junho. He turned back. Thank you. I mean it. Thank you. He nodded, a small smile touching his lips. Get some rest, Natasha Harvey. Tomorrow we start figuring out how to get your life back. After he left, Natasha did as suggested, took a long shower, washing away the blood and grime and terror of the day. Someone had indeed left clothes on the bed, soft cotton pants and a t-shirt, more comfortable than she could have imagined. She climbed into the bed, expecting to lie awake all night as she had so many nights recently, but exhaustion dragged her under almost immediately. She woke screaming 3 hours later, tangled in sheets, Brian's face from her nightmare still vivid. His hands around her throat, his voice telling her she'd never escape, that she belonged to him forever. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, and she fought wildly until a voice cut through the panic. Natasha. Natasha, you're safe. You're in my house. It's Junho. You're safe. She focused on his face, illuminated by the bedside lamp he must have turned on. He was in different clothes, sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking like he'd been woken from his own sleep. I'm sorry, she gasped. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. Don't apologize. I understand nightmares. He released her shoulders as soon as she'd calmed, stepping back to give her space. Can I get you anything? Water? She nodded, and he disappeared, returning moments later with a glass. She drank gratefully, her hands still shaking. Does this happen often? He asked gently. Almost every night. Sometimes multiple times. She set the glass down, humiliated. I should probably go. You don't need to deal with. You're not going anywhere, he said firmly. And I don't mind. My room is next door. I'll hear if you need anything. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. He pulled the chair over to the side of the bed and sat down. Sleep. I'll stay until you're settled. Junho, it's the middle of the night. You need rest too. I'm used to late nights. Please just try to sleep. Natasha lay back down, hyper-aware of his presence but also, strangely, comforted by it. Having someone watching over her, someone who wasn't Brian, it was so foreign to what she'd experienced that she didn't know how to process it. Can I ask you something? She said into the darkness. Anything. Why are you being so kind to me? He was quiet for a moment. My mother was in an abusive marriage before she married my father. Her first husband was a violent man. She's told me stories about that time, the fear, the isolation, the way he made her doubt her own sanity. My father saved her, in a way. Gave her a safe place to land while she found her strength again. I suppose I learned from his example. I'm sorry she went through that. She's stronger for it now. And she got away, started over, found real love eventually. There's hope, Natasha. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but there is. She closed her eyes, tears leaking from the corners. I don't know if I can ever trust anyone again. That's okay. Trust is earned, not given. Take your time. She must have fallen back asleep because when she woke again, weak dawn light was filtering through the curtains and Junho was gone. But there was a note on the nightstand, breakfast at 9. Take your time. You're safe. She got up slowly, her body aching in ways that had nothing to do with physical injuries. In the bathroom, she examined her face. The split lip was swollen, the bruise on her jaw had darkened overnight. Evidence. Always evidence, even when Brian tried to hide it. Downstairs, she followed the sound of voices and the smell of coffee to a large, sunlit kitchen where Mrs. Lim was puttering around despite Junho's protests that she should be resting. Ah, Natasha. Sit. You need food. Too skinny. Mrs. Lim immediately began preparing a plate. Mom, the doctor said light activities only. Making breakfast is light activity. She shooed him away. You go make your phone calls. Men always on phone. Junho caught Natasha's eye and smiled wryly. She's impossible. Please eat. She won't rest until you do. Over breakfast, Korean dishes Natasha had never tried but found delicious. Mrs. Lim chatted about her garden, her book club, anything but the previous day's events. It was soothing, this normalcy. Junho returned an hour later with a serious expression. We need to talk, he said. In my office? Natasha followed him down a hallway to a room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk. He gestured for her to sit and closed the door. I had my people look into Brian Scott last night. Natasha, it's worse than I thought. He's been systematically tracking you for months. He has a private investigator on retainer who specializes in finding people who don't want to be found. That investigator tracked your purchases. You used your credit card at a coffee shop near your apartment here in Seattle. That's how he found you. Natasha felt sick. A coffee shop. I was so careful about everything else, and a $5 latte gave me away. We've handled that. My people have arranged for you to get new identification, new credit cards, everything in a different name. Ironically, my less-than-legal connections are going to be what keeps you safe from a man who uses legal means as weapons. Who are you? She asked. Really? He leaned back in his chair. My father built a business empire before he died. Some of it legitimate, real estate, import-export, restaurants. Some of it less so. He had ties to what people call the Korean Mafia, though that's a crude term. I inherited all of it. I've been working for the past 3 years to reform what I can, to move us away from the things I'm not proud of, the drug trade, human trafficking, the violence. It's not easy. There are people in the organization who resist change. But I'm trying. Why tell me this? Because you deserve honesty. And because if you're going to stay under my protection, you need to understand what that means. There will be men around this house sometimes. My security, my associates. They're loyal to me and they'll keep you safe, but they're not conventional employees. Natasha processed this. And Brian? What if he comes here? He won't get past the gate. But yes, he'll figure out where you are eventually. Men like him always do. When that happens, we'll deal with it. Junho's expression was hard. I've dealt with worse men than Brian Scott. Over the following days, a strange new routine established itself. Natasha was on medical leave from the hospital. Junho had arranged it through connections she didn't ask about, which gave her time to heal and, more importantly, to process everything that had happened. Mrs. Lim fussed over her constantly, making sure she ate, teaching her to make Korean dishes, showing her the extensive garden. Junho was often busy with business, but he checked on her regularly, always respectful, always maintaining careful boundaries. The nightmares continued. And true to his word, Junho heard them. 3-4 times a week, she'd wake screaming and find him in the chair beside her bed within minutes. He never tried to touch her unless she was in the grip of a panic attack, and even then only her shoulders, only enough to ground her. Mostly he just sat there, a calm presence in the darkness, talking quietly about nothing important until her breathing settled and sleep returned. You don't have to do this, she told him one night after a particularly bad episode. I know. It must be exhausting. It is, but I've had worse jobs. He smiled slightly. Besides, I'm something of an insomniac myself. You're actually giving me something useful to do with my midnight hours. Why don't you sleep? Family business isn't conducive to restful nights. Too many things to worry about, too many people depending on me to make the right decisions. He shrugged. It comes with the territory. Do you have anyone? A girlfriend, wife? No. My lifestyle doesn't really allow for it. Most women either want nothing to do with what I am or they want it too much. The money, the power, the danger. I've never found someone who could see past all that to just me. I find that hard to believe. Why? Because you've been nothing but kind to me. Patient. Respectful. And you're good looking. Most men. She stopped, not wanting to compare him to Brian. I'm not most men, he said quietly. And I'm certainly not him. One morning, 2 weeks into her stay, Junho knocked on her door earlier than usual. I have someone I'd like you to meet, he said. Dr. Susan Chin. She's a trauma therapist who specializes in domestic violence survivors. She's discreet, trustworthy, and brilliant. I thought you might be willing to talk with her. You found me a therapist? The nightmares aren't getting better, Natasha. And I can sit with you every night for the rest of your life if needed, but I think professional help might be more effective. He paused. I'm not trying to push you. Just offering. Dr. Chin turned out to be a small, sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who didn't waste time with pleasantries. She set up in Junho's study twice a week, and slowly, painfully, Natasha began to unpack the damage Brian had done. Not just the physical abuse but the psychological warfare, the gaslighting, the isolation, the systematic destruction of her self-worth. He made you doubt your own reality, Dr. Chin said during their third session. That's one of the most insidious forms of abuse. You stopped trusting your own perceptions, your own judgment. I was so stupid. You were in love with who you thought he was. That's not stupid. That's human. He wore a mask. No one sees through those immediately. My friends did. My sister did. And you didn't because you were too close. You wanted to believe the best of him. Again, that's not stupidity. That's hope. Never apologize for having hope. The therapy helped, but the nightmares persisted. One night, after she'd woken Junho for the third time, she found him reading in the chair. What are you reading? She asked, too wired to go back to sleep. He showed her the cover, Korean poetry. My father used to read this to me. I find it calming. Read to me? He did, translating as he went. His voice in the darkness, speaking words of beauty and longing, became her new lullaby. It became their routine. After nightmares, he would read until she slept. Sometimes poetry, sometimes novels, sometimes just news articles in that calm, measured voice. You're getting better, he observed one morning over breakfast. The nightmares are less frequent. Thanks to you. Thanks to Dr. Chin. And your own strength. I'm just the guy who sits in the chair. You're more than that, she said softly. You've been? I don't know how to explain it. You've been exactly what I needed without ever pushing for anything in return. I don't understand why. He set down his coffee cup, regarding her seriously. I told you, my mother's story. But there's more to it than that. I've spent my adult life in a world where everything is transactional. Where people only do things for advantage, for profit, for power. It's exhausting. When I met you, hiding in my car, terrified and brave at the same time, I saw someone who'd had that kind of thinking forced on her. Brian treating your relationship as a transaction, you as a possession. I didn't want to be another person using you for something. But I haven't exactly given you nothing. I've been a burden. You saved my mother's life. You make her smile, which is something I haven't seen enough of since my father died. You're teaching her English idioms that she uses incorrectly in hilarious ways. And, he hesitated, you've reminded me that not everything has to be business. That sometimes it's okay to just help someone because they need help. Mrs. Lim bustled in before Natasha could respond, announcing that she needed both of them to help her in the garden. As they spent the afternoon planting late-season vegetables, Natasha felt something unfamiliar. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, but the absence of constant fear. It was a start. That evening, Junho asked if she'd like to walk the grounds with him. The estate was extensive, beautifully landscaped, with paths winding through sculpted gardens. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a small pond with a traditional Korean pavilion beside it. This was my father's favorite spot, Junho said. He'd come here to think, to make difficult decisions. I've been spending a lot of time here recently. Difficult decisions about the business? About a lot of things. He turned to face her. Natasha, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Her heart rate spiked. Okay. Do you feel safe here? Truly safe? Yes. And do you feel pressured? Like you owe me something beyond what you're comfortable giving? No. You've never made me feel that way. He nodded, looking relieved. Good. Because I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to misunderstand or feel obligated in any way. Junho, you're scaring me. That's the last thing I want to do. He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I'm not good at this. In my world, we don't do vulnerability. But you've been honest with me about your trauma, your fears, everything. You deserve the same honesty. What is it? I'm falling for you, he said simply. I've been trying to keep this professional, trying to just be someone who helps you heal. But somewhere between the nightmares and the breakfast with my mother and watching you learn to laugh again, I've developed feelings for you. Real ones. Natasha's breath caught. Junho. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm not expecting you to reciprocate. You've been through hell, and the last thing you need is another man complicating your life. I needed you to know. Because I don't want to be dishonest, and I don't want you to think I've been helping you with ulterior motives. These feelings developed despite my best efforts to prevent them, not because of some plan. She stared at him, this man who'd given her sanctuary, who'd sat with her through countless nightmares, who'd never once tried to touch her beyond those brief, necessary moments of comfort. Who'd respected every boundary, given her space to heal, asked for nothing. I don't know what I feel, she said honestly. Brian destroyed so much of my ability to trust, to believe in love as something good. Most days I can barely think about the future because I'm so focused on surviving the present. I know. That's why I'm not asking for anything. But I want to try, she heard herself say. I want to believe that not all men are like Brian. That there are people who can care without controlling, who can love without possessing. You've shown me that already. I'm just scared. Of course you are. Anyone would be. If we were to try this, and I'm not saying we should, but just hypothetically, it would have to be slow. So slow. I would need you to ask before you do anything. Before you hold my hand, before you kiss me, before any of it. I need to be able to say no and trust that you'll respect it. I can do that, he said softly. I will do that. Natasha, if you're willing to take this chance, I promise you, I will ask. Every time. And if you say no, that answer will be respected. No guilt, no pressure, no consequences. She looked at this man who'd become her unexpected sanctuary and made a decision that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Then ask me something now. His eyes widened slightly. Now. Start small. Test the promise. He thought for a moment, then, may I hold your hand? Such a simple question. Such weight behind it. She looked at his hand, extended between them, palm up, waiting. Not reaching for her, not taking, just offering. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his skin, the gentle way his fingers closed around hers. Secure but not tight, holding but not trapping. Yes, she whispered. You may. They stood there by the pond as evening fell, holding hands like teenagers, and Natasha felt something crack open in her chest. Not healed, not yet, but healing. The difference was everything. The following weeks brought a new dimension to their routine. Junho courted her with a patience she'd never experienced. He asked to sit beside her at breakfast. Asked if he could walk with her in the garden. Asked permission to take her to a movie, to dinner, to a museum. Each activity planned with her comfort in mind, always in public places where she'd feel safe, always with an explicit invitation she could decline without explanation. You're very good at this, she told him after a particularly lovely afternoon at an art gallery. At what? At making me feel like I have all the power. Like I'm in control. You do have all the power, he said seriously. That's not manipulation, Natasha. That's the truth. You get to decide if this happens, how fast it happens, what form it takes. I'm just hoping you'll decide it's worth the risk. Dr. Chin noticed the change in their sessions. "You're smiling more," she observed. "Something good happening?" Natasha told her about Junho, about the careful courtship. "Is it too soon?" she asked. "Is it unhealthy to even think about a relationship when I'm still this damaged?" "First, you're not damaged. You're healing, which is different. Second, only you can answer whether it's too soon. But from what you've told me, this man is giving you exactly what you need: agency, respect, patience. Those are the building blocks of healthy love. The fact that you can recognize them after what you've been through? That's growth." One evening, 6 weeks after she'd hidden in his car, Junho found her in the garden watching the sunset. "May I join you?" he asked. "Always." He sat beside her on the bench, maintaining a small distance. "I have something I need to tell you. Brian Scott has been making inquiries." Her blood ran cold. "He knows I'm here?" "He knows you're somewhere connected to me. One of his investigators has been asking questions, trying to find a way in. So far, my security has kept him at a distance, but he's persistent. I should leave. I'm putting you and your mother in danger." "You're not going anywhere," Junho said firmly. "And he's not getting to you. But I wanted you to be aware. My head of security will be increasing the protocols around the house. You might see more of my men around. I don't want you to be frightened." "I'm always frightened," she admitted. "Even here, even feeling safer than I have in a year, there's this constant background fear that he'll find a way. That he'll hurt someone I care about to get to me." Junho reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement. "May I touch your face?" She nodded, and he gently cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "He won't touch you. I promise. He won't touch my mother. He won't touch anyone in this house. Whatever it takes, Natasha. Whatever it takes." "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk so much for me?" "Because some things are worth the risk." He leaned forward slowly, stopping well before his lips could reach hers. "May I kiss you?" Her heart hammered. They'd been building to this, she knew, but actually faced with the reality of it, fear and desire warred in her chest. But she looked into his eyes and saw only patience, only waiting, only respect for whatever answer she gave. "Yes," she breathed. He kissed her softly, barely a brush of lips, nothing demanding or possessive. Just a gentle question that she could answer or not. She pressed closer, deepening the kiss, and felt his surprise, his careful response. He let her control it, let her set the pace, his hands staying where they were, one on her face, one resting lightly on her waist. When she pulled back, he didn't chase her lips. He just smiled. "Worth the wait," he murmured. "Was it everything you'd hoped?" "It was better. Because you chose it." That night, she had another nightmare. Brian breaking into the house, past all security, his hands around her throat. She woke gasping to find Junho already there, but this time instead of the chair, he was sitting on the edge of her bed. "May I hold you?" he asked. She nodded, and he gathered her into his arms, her head against his chest, his heartbeat steady and strong under her ear. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "I'm here. You're safe." "Stay," she whispered. "Don't go back to your room. Just stay." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." He shifted so they were both lying down, his arms around her but not constraining, his body warm along her back. For the first time in months, she slept through until morning. But peace was not to be permanent. 3 days later, Junho's head of security, a grim-faced man named Han, requested an urgent meeting. In Junho's office, with Natasha present at Junho's insistence, Han delivered the news. "We have a problem. There's a mole in the organization." Junho's expression went cold in a way Natasha had never seen. "Explain." "Someone has been feeding information to Brian Scott. Details about the house security, Miss Harvey's routines, your mother's schedule. The information is too specific to be from external surveillance." "Who?" "We're not certain yet, but the leak is coming from inside." "My best guess?" Someone who had access to your personal calendar and security briefings. That's a short list. Junho's jaw worked. Find them. I don't care what it takes. After Han left, Natasha turned to Junho. Who would do this? And why? Money, probably. Brian has resources, and there are always people willing to sell information for the right price. But we'll find them. He pulled her close. I won't let him get to you. The mole was identified within 36 hours. Kim Dae-won, one of Junho's mid-level associates, who'd been part of the organization for 3 years. The confrontation happened in Junho's office, with Natasha watching from the doorway despite Junho's urging that she didn't need to be there. Why? Junho asked, his voice deadly calm. Dae-won, a man in his early 30s with nervous eyes, shifted uncomfortably. Your father promised me my sister would marry someone from a good family, someone who could elevate her status. I assumed it would be you. She's perfect for you, good family, educated, understands our world. Then this woman appears. He jerked his chin toward Natasha. An outsider. Someone who brings danger to our door. Brian Scott offered me money and promised connections. My sister could still marry well with that kind of backing. So you sold us out for your sister's marriage prospects, Junho said flatly. I did what was necessary for family. Family doesn't betray family. Junho stood, moving around the desk. You put everyone in this household at risk. You put Natasha at risk. You violated every code we have. For an outsider who means nothing. Junho moved so fast Natasha barely saw it. One moment he was behind his desk, the next he had Dae-won against the wall, forearm across his throat. She means everything, he said, his voice low and dangerous. And you will regret the day you decided my personal life was your business. What happened to Dae-won after that, Natasha didn't know. Junho wouldn't tell her, saying only that he'd been dealt with and would never be a problem again. She suspected it wasn't pleasant but found she couldn't muster much sympathy for someone who'd sold her location to Brian. But the damage was done. Brian now knew definitively where she was. The phone call started again, to the house line that Junho had unlisted but Brian had somehow obtained. Hang-ups, heavy breathing, sometimes Brian's voice. I know you're there, Natasha. I know you're hiding behind your criminal boyfriend. But this isn't over. You're mine. You'll always be mine. Junho had the number changed, but it didn't matter. Brian had found her. The next escalation came in the form of a legal letter. Brian was suing her for breach of promise, claiming emotional damages from the broken engagement. It was laughable, absurd, but it was also strategic. It meant depositions, court dates, having to relive everything publicly. He's trying to force me out into the open, Natasha said, staring at the legal papers. He knows I'll have to appear in court. Not necessarily, Junho said. I have lawyers too. Good ones. They'll handle this. And they did, filing motion after motion, getting delays, making Brian's life difficult in return. But the stress was wearing on Natasha. The nightmares came back with a vengeance. She lost weight, couldn't eat, jumped at every sound. Even Junho's presence couldn't fully calm her anymore. One night, 3 months after she'd hidden in his car, she woke from a nightmare so vivid she couldn't breathe. Junho was there immediately, but nothing he did could break through the panic attack. Dr. Chin was called at 2 in the morning, came to the house, helped talk Natasha down from the ledge of hysteria she was teetering on. He's winning, Natasha sobbed after Dr. Chin left. Even here, even safe, he's still winning. He's in my head, controlling my life, making me afraid. How is that different from before? Junho held her, his own expression helpless. Tell me what to do. Tell me how to help you. Make him stop. Just make him stop. I can do that, Junho said quietly. Say the word and he'll never bother you again. She looked up at him, understanding what he was offering. The kind of permanent solution that his world specialized in. For a moment she was tempted, so tempted. To just make Brian disappear, to be free of this constant terror. No, she whispered. I won't let you become a murderer for me. I won't let him corrupt us like that. Then we find another way. The other way came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Lim. The next morning at breakfast, the older woman set down her teacup with a decisive click. This Brian, he is a bully. Bullies must be faced with what they fear most. What does Brian fear? Natasha asked tiredly. Exposure. Humiliation. Men like him, they care about image, about reputation. Mrs. Lim looked at her son. Junho, you have people who can find information, yes? Yes. Then find everything about this Brian. Everything bad, everything he wants hidden. And then we show the world who he really is. It took Junho's people 2 weeks to compile the dossier. When they were done, they had everything: Brian's affair with his secretary, documented with hotel receipts and photographs while he was publicly still engaged to Natasha. His history of violence, not just with Natasha but with 2 previous girlfriends who'd been paid off to keep quiet. Evidence of professional misconduct, cases he'd manipulated, witnesses he'd intimidated. Financial irregularities in his father's campaign funds that Brian had helped orchestrate. It was damning, comprehensive, and entirely accurate. If we release this, his career is over, Junho told Natasha. His father's political ambitions take a serious hit. The legal community will destroy him. But Natasha, this is your choice. It will be public. Your story will be part of it. Are you prepared for that? She thought about it, really thought about it. Going public meant everyone knowing what had happened to her. It meant judgment, speculation, her trauma becoming entertainment. It meant Brian fighting back with everything he had. But it also meant other women would see what he was. It meant his future victims might be spared. It meant standing up instead of hiding. It meant refusing to be a victim. Do it, she said. Release everything. The story broke on a Thursday morning, picked up by every major news outlet in the country by afternoon. By Friday, Brian Scott's firm had suspended him pending investigation. By Monday, 3 more women had come forward with their own stories of his abuse. By Wednesday, his father had withdrawn from his political race and Brian was facing criminal charges. And on Friday night, Brian came to Junho's house. He didn't make it past the gate. Junho's security stopped him, but Natasha heard the commotion from inside the house. Brian's voice raised in fury, screaming threats. She found herself walking toward the front door despite Junho trying to stop her. Natasha, don't. You don't need to see him. Yes, I do. I need to face him. Not hide anymore. Junho studied her face, then nodded slowly. Together? Together. They walked to the gate, where Brian was restrained by 2 of Junho's security team. He looked terrible, disheveled, unshaven, wild-eyed. Nothing like the polished lawyer who'd swept her off her feet. When he saw her, his expression twisted into something ugly. You bitch, he snarled. You destroyed my life. Everything I worked for, everything my family built. You destroyed it yourself, Natasha said, her voice stronger than she'd expected. I just made sure people knew the truth about who you are. I loved you. No, you didn't. I foolishly loved you. You wanted to own me for political leverage. There's a difference. She stepped closer to the gate, Junho a solid presence at her side. I'm not afraid of you anymore, Brian. You have no power over me. The restraining order is still in effect, and if you come near me again, you'll go to jail. Your father's connections can't save you now. Everyone knows what you've done. You think you're safe here? With him? Brian's eyes fixed on Junho with hatred. He's a criminal, Natasha. He's worse than anything you accused me of being. He's never hurt me, Natasha said simply. He's never made me afraid. He's never tried to control me or diminish me or make me doubt my own sanity. Whatever else he is, he's been more of a good man to me than you ever were. This isn't over. It is, though. Junho spoke for the first time, his voice cold. You're going to leave now. You're going to stay away from Natasha, from this property, from anyone associated with us. If you don't, the next information release won't just ruin your career. It will send you to prison. I have evidence of things you've done that didn't make it into the first dossier. Things involving your father's campaign funds that constitute federal crimes. Do you understand me? Brian stared at him with impotent rage. Do you understand me? Junho repeated, each word edged with steel. Yes. Good. Now leave. And don't come back. They watched as Brian was escorted off the property, his car screeching away into the night. Natasha felt Junho's hand find hers, warm and solid. How do you feel? He asked. Like I can breathe again, she said wonderingly. For the first time in over a year, I feel like I can actually breathe. That night, there were no nightmares. Natasha slept deeply, dreamlessly, wrapped in Junho's arms. When she woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, she found him awake, watching her with a soft expression. Good morning, he murmured. Good morning. She stretched, feeling muscles uncoil that had been tense for so long. I didn't dream. I know. You smiled in your sleep. Did I? Yes. It was beautiful. He brushed hair from her face, the gesture now familiar and welcome. Natasha, I need to ask you something. Always with the asking, she teased gently. It's important. He sat up, pulling her with him so they were facing each other. What happened yesterday facing Brian? You were incredible. So strong. You've come so far from the terrified woman in my car. Thanks to you. Thanks to yourself. I just provided a safe place to land. He took her hands in his. But now I need to know, what do you want? Now that Brian's no longer an immediate threat, now that you're healing, what does your future look like? Do you want to go back to nursing? Move into your own place? Return to your old life? The question scared her because she didn't know the answer. 6 months ago, all she'd wanted was to feel safe. Now she had that, but what did she want beyond survival? I don't know, she admitted. I love nursing, but the hospital here knows I'm on leave for personal reasons. Eventually they'll want me back or want me to resign. I could go back to my old hospital, my old life, but that life has you missing from it. Your mother. This house, this garden, these routines we've built. I don't want to lose that. His expression brightened. Then don't. Junho. I'm not asking you to marry me, he said quickly. I'm not asking you to commit to forever when you've barely had time to figure out who you are without fear. But I'm asking you to stay. Keep living here. Date me properly. Let me court you without the shadow of Brian hanging over everything. See where this goes when it's just about us, not about survival. And your mother? Your organization? They're okay with me just being here? My mother adores you. She's already told me that if I let you leave, she'll disown me. As for the organization, they understand that you're under my protection. That makes you family in their eyes. And beyond that, it's none of their business who I choose to have in my life. Natasha looked around the room that had become her sanctuary, thought about Mrs. Lim teaching her to make kimchi, about Junho reading poetry in the middle of the night, about slowly learning to trust again. I want to go back to nursing, she said slowly. But maybe not at that hospital. Maybe somewhere new, fresh start. And I want to keep seeing Dr. Chin. I'm not done healing. And I want to date you properly like you said. Learn who we are together when it's not about crisis management. I can work with all of that, Junho said, his smile transforming his face. So you'll stay? I'll stay. Not forever, not yet. But for now. Yes, I'll stay. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and she kissed him back without fear, without hesitation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. May I tell you something? He asked. You don't have to ask permission for words. These words I do. I'm falling in love with you, Natasha Harvey. Not the idea of you, not gratitude or debt or obligation. The woman who hid in my car. The woman who faces her nightmares. The woman who chose to be strong even when it would have been easier to let me handle Brian permanently. The woman who makes my mother laugh and taught me that not everything has to be a transaction. I'm falling in love with you. Tears streamed down her face, but this time they were good tears. Healing tears. I'm falling for you too, she whispered. I'm terrified of it, but I'm falling. You've shown me what love should look like. Patient, respectful, generous. You've given me space to heal and held me when I needed holding. You've never asked for more than I could give. And I never will. I know. That's why I'm willing to try. Later, over breakfast with Mrs. Lim fussing over them both, Natasha felt something she'd thought Brian had stolen from her forever. Hope. Real, genuine hope for a future that didn't revolve around fear and survival. Junho caught her eye across the table and smiled, and she smiled back, a real smile that reached her eyes. She still had nightmares sometimes. Still flinched at unexpected noises. Still carried scars, both visible and invisible, from her time with Brian. But she was healing, growing stronger, learning to trust again. And she was doing it alongside a man who proved every day that love didn't have to hurt, that strength could be gentle, that patience was its own form of devotion. 3 months later, Natasha accepted a position at a different hospital across town, returning to the work she loved. 6 months after that, she moved her things from the guest room to Junho's room, making the arrangement official in her own time on her own terms. 9 months after hiding in his car, she had dinner with her family, who flew out to meet Junho and declared him acceptable, high praise from her father. And a year after that terrible day in the parking garage, she stood in the garden where Junho had first asked to kiss her. And this time, when he got down on one knee with a ring, she said yes without hesitation. Not because she needed him to save her, she'd saved herself with his support. Not because she was afraid to be alone, she'd learned she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. But because she loved him truly and deeply, and because he'd proven in 1,000 small ways that he was worthy of that love. Brian Scott watched the engagement announcement from his studio apartment across town, his legal career in ruins, his father refusing his calls, his life a shadow of what it had been. He'd lost everything trying to possess what was never his to keep. Natasha had won, not through violence or revenge, but by refusing to let him define her, by choosing to heal, by finding someone who loved her enough to let her be free. As Junho slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her close for a kiss, Natasha thought about the journey that had brought her here, the terror, the trauma, the slow rebuilding of trust. She thought about the woman who'd hidden in a stranger's car, and the woman she'd become. They were the same person but transformed. Scarred but not broken. Cautious but not closed. Afraid but not defeated. Happy. Junho murmured against her lips. Getting there, she said honestly. Every day a little bit more. That's all I ask. Just keep getting there. I'll be beside you the whole way. And he was. Through more therapy sessions and fewer nightmares. Through court dates as Brian's criminal trial proceeded. Through Natasha's family's gradually acceptance of Junho's complicated life. Through Mrs. Lim's delighted wedding planning and Junho's continued reformation of his organization. Through every step forward and every occasional step back, he was there, asking permission, respecting boundaries, proving that love could be a refuge instead of a prison. The wedding was small, intimate, held in the garden where so much of their story had unfolded. Maya was maid of honor, crying through the whole ceremony. Mrs. Lim and Natasha's parents sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Junho's closest associates formed a protective circle around the perimeter, ensuring no unwanted guests could intrude. And when Natasha walked down the aisle, not given away by anyone because she wasn't property to be transferred, she did so of her own free will, on her own terms, toward a future she was choosing. I love you, Junho said as they exchanged vows he'd written himself. I promise to always ask, to always respect your no, to be patient with your healing, to protect you without possessing you, to love you without limits but with all the boundaries you need. You saved my mother's life, but you saved mine too. You reminded me what it means to be human. I love you, Natasha responded, her voice strong and clear. You gave me sanctuary when I had nowhere to run. You gave me patience when I had only fear. You showed me that love could be kind, that strength could be gentle, that a man could be powerful without being dangerous. You asked when others demanded. You waited when others pushed. You respected every boundary even when it cost you. Thank you for loving me enough to let me heal. Thank you for proving that not all men are monsters. Thank you for being exactly who I needed when I needed it most. As they kissed to seal their marriage, Natasha heard the click of a camera, her mother capturing the moment. Another photograph, she thought. But this one told a different story than the one from her graduation with Brian smiling coldly beside her. This one told a story of survival, of healing, of love that lifted instead of crushed. That night, after the celebration ended and the guests departed, Junho carried her over the threshold of their bedroom. He set her down gently and just held her, swaying slightly to music only they could hear. No regrets? He asked. None. You. My only regret is that I didn't find you sooner. That you had to go through hell before you found your way to my car. Maybe I needed to go through it to appreciate this. To appreciate you. To know the difference between love that destroys and love that heals. Wise words, Mrs. Lim. She laughed, testing out the name. Mrs. Lim. It sounds strange. You could have kept your name. I told you that. I know. But I wanted this. A new name for a new life. Natasha Lim. Someone Brian Scott never touched, never controlled, never broke. They made love slowly that night, every touch a question answered, every boundary respected, every moment a reaffirmation of the trust they built brick by careful brick. And afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Natasha slept deeply and dreamlessly, finally free. But across town, in a bar that had seen better days, Brian Scott sat with a glass of whiskey and a phone with a blocked number pulled up. He'd lost his career, his reputation, his future. But he hadn't lost his connections or his obsession. He stared at the wedding announcement he'd torn from the paper, Natasha's smiling face mocking him from the grainy photograph. If I can't have you, he whispered to the picture, no one will. He dialed the number and when a rough voice answered, he said, I have a job for you. And money is no object. In the Lim household, Junho woke suddenly from a sound sleep, a feeling of unease prickling at his awareness. Years of living in a dangerous world had honed his instincts. Something was wrong. He looked at Natasha sleeping peacefully beside him and felt a chill despite the warm room. He picked up his phone and called Han. Increase security around the house. Immediately. And I want surveillance on Brian Scott, where he is, who he's talking to, everything. Something specific happen? Han asked, alert despite the late hour. Call it a feeling. Just do it. Done. Junho hung up and gathered Natasha closer, his mind racing. Brian had been quiet for too long, too compliant. Men like him didn't give up. They regrouped, planned, waited for the perfect moment to strike. The game, Junho realized, might not be over after all. And as dawn broke over Seattle, casting long shadows across the city, both men prepared for a final confrontation. One to protect the woman he loved, the other to destroy her. The question wasn't if they would clash, but when. And what it would cost when they did. Will Junho's instincts be enough to save Natasha from Brian's final desperate act of vengeance? Can love truly conquer obsession, or will the shadows of the past consume them both? Find out what happens next in part 2. Don't forget to like this video if Natasha's story moved you, subscribe to Shadows of Justice for part 2, and comment below. Do you think Junho can protect Natasha from what's coming? Or has Brian found the one weakness in Junho's armor? Part 2 drops next week. You won't want to miss what happens when a lawyer's obsession collides with a mafia boss's protection. The final battle is coming, and only one man will walk away. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the explosive conclusion to Natasha and Jinaho's story.